Hey there, people of YouTube! Like a lot of Warrior Cats fans, I don't actually know what happens in most of the series. And obviously, the only way to fix this was to build a canon-compliant timeline of all the books, which I've decided to make your problem. This video is about Into the Wild, which seems pretty self-consistent. There's a few timeline ambiguities, a couple of cats that probably shouldn't exist, and I think the seasons might be weird. But nothing outright contradicts itself or requires you to stretch your suspension of disbelief to fit into place. And I'm sure all future books will be the same. The story begins on the night Spotifleaf receives the Fire Loan prophecy. This is also the night ThunderClan loses a battle for Sunning Rocks. We are specifically told that it's a half moon. Now there are 4 phases of the moon. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that actually, but for simplicity's sake, there are 4 phases of the moon. A full moon, a half moon, and a new moon. 1, 2, 3. Oh, sorry. There are actually 2 types of half moons. One is the moon goes from full to new, and another as it goes from new back to full. There are 4 phases of the moon. It takes an average of 29.5 days for the moon to cycle through its phases, and about 7.4 days for it to go from one phase to the other. Since cats can't count anyway, I'm going to call these periods of time a month and a week, respectively. Since we were given no hint as to if the moon is waxing or waning, and no indication of when the last gathering was, there's actually 2 possible times this scene could take place. It's either a week after the last gathering, or a week before the next one. We're also told that New Leaf is late, so it's currently Leaf Bear? Yeah, Leaf Bear. It's supposed to be New Leaf, but we're stuck in a cold spell that's keeping prey scarce. The books don't mention the seasons as often as the phases of the moon, which makes sense. The seasons change less often than the moon does, after all. They are mentioned, however, which makes them another good touchstone for conceptualizing the passage of time. I mean, who doesn't know the order of the seasons, right? Certainly no one here. And if there was someone here who, I don't know, has struggled to remember the order of seasons since they were a small child, well, they certainly wouldn't have made them the second most important anchor point in their Warrior Cats timeline. They also say something about it being a new year, so I guess it's January. But I think adding human dates to this will overcomplicate something I'm already overcomplicating in different, more fun ways. Like how I'm keeping track of ages. This is reasonable enough for cats who were born on page, as their births are simply another context clue for the passage of time. But I will also be trying to track the ages of the rest of ThunderClan, who are occasionally vaguely referred to as young or old. So the prologue gives us 5 named cats: Tigerclaw, Redtail, and Mousefur at a battle over Sunning Rocks, and Bluestar and Spotted Leaf at the prophecy scene. Mousefur is repeatedly called a young warrior, while Tigerclaw will be later called a senior warrior, so I'm going to say that he's older than she is. They don't mention Redtail's age for, reasons. But I feel that it's implied that senior warriors are usually the ones picked for deputy, so I'm going to stick him loosely in Tigerclaw's age bracket. Bluestar is old and gray around the muzzle, and eats on the senior warrior side of camp, so she's also going in this age bracket. The graying might mean she's older than Redtail and Tigerclaw, but it could also just be stress. Spotted Leaf is so young and pretty and beautiful and smells nice and blah 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 and so and so. Graypaw calls her young for a medicine cat. But since we don't know how old medicine cats tend to be, this doesn't really mean anything. It's too relative. But seeing as the narrative also describes her as young without any additional qualifiers, I feel safe letting her in the young category with Mousefur. The first chapter begins with Rusty dreaming of catching mice for the 3rd time since the full moon. From this, we can tell that it's not currently a full moon, but little else. There are no references to the events of the prologue because Rusty wouldn't know them, so we can't use anything from chapter 1 to place the prologue on the timeline. In this chapter, we meet Graypaw and Lionheart. Graypaw complains that kids can't even start training until they're 6 moons old, and notes that this is his first night out as an apprentice, giving us the clearest age point I think we're going to get from someone who's not literally born on screen. We get nothing about Lionheart's age, so let's assume he's just some generic warrior age for now. Chapter 2 does mention that late new leaf means prey is scarce. Due to reasons I'll get into later, I do think that Chapter 2 takes place during New Leaf, and they're not just complaining that it's not here yet. Since the prologue is at the tail end of a leaf bear that should already be over, and Chapter 2 is during the New Leaf that they were waiting for, I don't think it's too wild of me to say that they're in the same moon. This means that Spotted Leaf received the prophecy either 1 or 3 weeks before Blue Star met Rusty. How can I be so specific? Well, I've peeked ahead in the video, so I know that there's a gathering in just a couple days. Chapter 2 ends with Rusty going home to sleep, and chapters 3 and 4 take place over the next day. In chapter 3, Rusty spends the afternoon with his kitty pet friends before heading off to see ThunderClan Camp for the first time, where he meets... oh dear. He meets White Storm, Darkstripe, Longtail, Spotted Leaf, Small Ear, Ravenpaw. He sees a Ginger Queen greet a Tabby Queen with distinct black markings, and he hears several kits in the nursery. Okay, let's do the easy placements first. The kits are the youngest because they're kits. Ravenpaw goes in the apprentice age bracket with Graypaw and Rusty. Spotted Leaf is already in the young warriors bracket with Mousefur. Darkstripe, we are told, is neither young nor pretty, but he's also not referred to as a senior warrior, so we'll put him in the warriors bracket with Lionheart. White Storm is specifically called a senior warrior, so he goes in the senior warrior bracket with Blue Star, Tigerclaw, and Redtail. Oh, Longtail. Longtail is easy to place. He was made a warrior 2 moons ago, which makes him a young warrior. And while we're here, I think it's time to admit the problems with my title-based age system. Unlike kids, who become apprentices at or around 6 moons, apprentices become warriors whenever the leader feels like it. There's a possibility that Longtail was held back for moons upon moons, and he's a young warrior that's as old as the senior warriors. Or maybe he graduated early, and he's a young warrior baby genius who's younger than the apprentices. But for the sake of my sanity, let's work with the assumption that elders are older than senior warriors are older than warriors are older than young warriors, and young warriors are older than apprentices. We will maintain this unless we have evidence to the contrary, so there's some semblance of order. I'm sure there might be a time or two where an apprentice is older than a warrior, but it probably won't happen often, right? Moving on to the Vagrant cats, Rusty also sees a pale ginger she-cat greet a queen with distinct tabby markings. Okay, since this is in the nursery, we can use the allegiances to narrow down our suspects to one of our 4 queens. Because the distinct tabby queen has black markings, we can be fairly certain she's not Goldenflower, who's ginger, and she's not Frostfur, who's all white. That leaves Speckletail and Brindleface. Fun fact about Speckletail, we're never actually told what color she is in this book. She's only described as a pale tabby. She could be cream, or blue, or both, or some other combination. But we do know she's pale. And I don't think a pale tabby would have black stripes. So that leaves us with Brindleface. So, is Brindleface the distinct tabby queen? Okay, so I thought I had an opinion on this, and I still think I have an opinion on this, but I do not know what the opinion is. I started off completely convinced that the tabby was Brindleface, and then I was convinced it couldn't be Brindleface, and I've been going back and forth ever since. One of the things I think I'm caught up on is the fact that Brindleface is gray, so I want to assume that means she has gray stripes. But Darkstripe exists, and I'm pretty sure it's implied that his stripes are black. They say that she, like her kits, is gray with darker flecks, but they don't say how much darker those flecks are. I had assumed the distinct tabby markings were stripes, but black spots on a gray cat are also pretty distinct, and spotted tabbies are a thing. But on the other hand, Brindleface is never described as having distinct markings, and you'd think that if the markings were truly distinct, Firepaw might mention them at least once. I don't think I'd be stuck mulling this over if my opinion wasn't a perfect 50-50 split. I'm not going to share what I believe right now, because whenever I have one opinion, the other just seems silly to me. I'm sure that what I believe while writing the script will not match what I believe while recording the audio, and I'm not committing either opinion to YouTube where I'll have to stick with it for eternity. The distinct tabby is too vague to pin down, and Brindleface is just vague enough that she could swing either way. To all those AU crafters out there, I say follow your hearts, do whatever fits your various machinations. I'm putting the distinct tabby in the paradox box, where she will only exist if she needs to for the timeline, and that's only because I don't want to have to design her. That leaves us with the ginger tabby she-cat. Since she can't be either of our decidedly not ginger queens, Frostfur and Brindleface, she must be Speckletail or Goldenflower. Now my proper, evidence-based assessment is that she's Goldenflower because every other time the book mentions a pale ginger queen, they're talking about Goldenflower. And while the books tend to be vague, the descriptions are pretty consistent when they decide to describe them. My real reason for thinking this is Goldenflower is the fact that it's a friendly interaction, and I can't picture Speckletail having one of those. Sorry, Speckletail. As for the kits, they exist. There's more than one of them. We don't get any descriptions or even know whose kits they are, so there's not much we can do with this introduction. Oh, they have to be under 3 moons old, or they would have been apprenticed by the end of this book, or the first chapter of Fire and Ice. Wow, that was a lot of cats. Moving on to chapter 4, oh, there's more. Okay, so in chapter 4, Goldenflower actually gets named, along with Sandpaw, Dustpaw, Halftail, One Eye, and Dappletail. This chapter is easier than the last one, with Halftail, One Eye, and Dappletail being introduced as elders. And Sandpaw and Dustpaw are obviously apprentices. Goldenflower isn't described either way, so she gets the generic warrior category. And this chapter establishes that Lionheart has been a warrior longer than Tigerclaw, which by the rules of my age system means he's also older than him. So let's pull him up to the senior warrior category. Moving on, chapter 5 takes place across the next 2 days, with Firepaw waking at dawn for training and spending the entire day being shown the borders of the territory. During the tour, they pass the tree cut place, which Greypaw states will be quiet until Greenleaf, which is in a few moons. I'm taking the fact that Greenleaf is a few moons away as confirmation that it's New Leaf. The apprentice den is a bit emptier when they get back because Sandpaw and Dustpaw are at tonight's gathering. The next day, there's more training, during which Tigerclaw complains that Ravenpaw's crouch is terrible despite 2 moons of training. Ravenpaw having 2 moons of training to Firepaw and Greypaw's 2 days means he's also 2 moons older than them. Or at least 2 moons older than Greypaw. We don't really know how old Rusty was when they found him, do we? Well, anyway, there's a chance Tigerclaw is exaggerating to make Ravenpaw feel bad, but I think if he was really pushing it, Lionheart would call him out on it, so I'm going to say that Ravenpaw is 8 moons old. Chapters 6 through 8 and the beginning of chapter 9 all take place on the same day. What day is that? Well, there's actually a time skip. In the beginning of chapter 6, Firepaw says he's been training for 2 moons. He is, of course, wrong. Chapter 5 ended 2 days after a gathering. If 2 moons have passed, then last gathering should have been pretty recently, and the next one should be about a month away. But, if we skip ahead in the video again, we can see that we're actually only a week away from the next gathering. This gives us 2 options. Either it's actually been a moon in 3 weeks, which is almost 2 moons, or it's been 2 moons and 3 weeks, so almost 3 moons. To figure out which it is, we must look at the seasons. Okay, so the seasons are weird. It took me a while to notice because I was avoiding them, but you could make the argument that Greenleaf in this book only lasts a month. But I think I've found a reality that can piece everything together. So, in Chapter 5, Greypaw says that Greenleaf is a few moons away. And after the time skip, Firepaw says it's been 2 moons and it's currently Greenleaf. Now we've established that when Firepaw says 2 moons, he means almost 2 or almost 3. Now I think the word few refers to around 3. So when Greypaw says Greenleaf is in a few moons, that feels like he's saying in about 3 moons to me. To balance these 2 facts, I'm going to go with the longer interpretation of the time skip. Now, the problem here is that I know that the gathering at the end of Into the Wild is the one right before the gathering at the start of Fire and Ice, and the Fire and Ice gathering takes place during Leaffall. If Greenleaf started just a bit before the time skip, then it only lasted a month. Since they hype up Greenleaf as the good time of year where all the kittens are born, I don't think they'd let an impossibly short one pass by without comment. This is another reason we need to choose the 2 moons and 3 weeks option. It gives me space to push back the start of Greenleaf to something less squished. Assuming Leafball started like a week before the gathering in Fire and Ice, we can get Greenleaf to last 2.5 moons. This does mean that Greypaw's in a few moons only covers a little over a month, but hey, it's hard to predict the weather. Besides, Greypaw's 6. How would he know how long it takes to get to summer? He probably just heard some other cat say it and... Wait. If the logging mill operates in the summer, how does Firepaw know what it sounds like? He's less than a year old. He's never experienced summer, just spring and the one before spring. Why are they even logging in summer? Aren't you supposed to cut trees in the winter while they're dormant? Wait, no, that might just be for pruning, because it's to keep the tree from going to shock. Oh, Wikipedia says that winter's the peak logging season? Or it was the peak logging season in the 16th century? Are they just logging in summer and winter? Why not just do it during spring then? What's the point? Wait, what's the point of this? So, anyway, that's why I'm saying that Firepaw has actually had nearly 3 moons of training, with the time skip lasting 2 moons and 3 weeks. And I'm supported by the fact that just 4 days after this, Firepaw will say that they've been training for 3 moons. Which I forgot about until after I had written that whole section. But hey, don't laugh at me. Laugh at Firepaw, who's claiming that they've all trained for 3 moons, when Ravenpaw is sitting right there, having trained for 5. What else? Oh, Frostfur is tending to kittens in Chapter 8. If they're the same kittens from before, they're at least 2 to 3 moons old. These could be the Frostfur, but all queens do look after all kittens, so they might not be. Chapter 9 has a small time jump. They say the sun has risen 3 times since Yellowfang's arrival, meaning we got 2 uneventful days before today. On this day, Yellowfang hisses at a young tabby kit who's playing with a gray and white kitten. Who are these kits? Good question. Moving on. Okay, so in Chapter 12, Speckletail will describe this tabby as being Goldenflower's youngest kit. What? No. Like, I'm sure if I go check the wiki, there'll be a screenshot of a comment of a Facebook post where a fan went, I think this character should be called Hazelkit. And one of the 5 authors went, cute, I love it. And now it's official canon that Hazelkit is Bramblekit and Tawnykit's older half-sibling or something, but listen, if I accept that as canon, I'll have to accept all the Facebook posts as canon, and you wouldn't do that to me, right? You see how I've gotten over this one children's book? You wouldn't drop me in the deep end of the entire internet, right? For now, let's just drop these 2 little guys in the paradox box with not Brindleface, where mystery cats can both exist and not exist, so I can just decide later that one of them was Swiftpaw or Cinderpelt or someone. Chapters 10 and 11 both take place the next day. Our apprentice trio is sent out on an assessment. It's normal stuff. They have to catch a bunch of prey. Tigerclaw tries to kill Ravenpaw again. During the assessment, Firepaw sees his old kitty pet friend, Smudge. Smudge smells funny, and that's because he's been neutered. Now it's important to note that Firepaw believes that all kitty pets are sent to the cutter when they're over 6 moons. Now it doesn't matter if this is true or not, because the fact that Firepaw believes it means that he must have been barely 6 moons or less than 6 moons when Blue Star recruited him. Later, they'll see a kid at the gathering and go, "Wow, he's so small. He looks like he's only 3 or 4 moons old." So I'm willing to believe that Rusty was visibly over 4 moons when they found him. And I do think that the authors intended him to be basically 6. But I think it's funny to make him as young as possible, so I'm making him 5. This leaves him 8 to Greypaw's 9 and Ravenpaw's 11. Everyone thought he was small from all that kitty pet slop, but it was just him being a literal baby. I'd make him younger if I could get away with it, but it would feel like a stretch. So I'm gonna leave Rusty was actually a really big 4-moon-old as AU fodder. As they returned from their assessment, the trio was admired by a handful of kittens. Goldenflower's Tabby from earlier, a fluffy gray kit, not gray and white, a tortie, and a black kit. Maybe this is that whole doesn't remember what happens in the books thing popping up, but I have no idea who the tortie or the black kit could be. The gray kit is the only one given an age, being 2 moons at the oldest according to Firepaw. They might be Cinderpaw, they're the right color at least. Everyone else goes in the paradox box, but I'll let them sit outside of it. As the trio basks in how much prey they've caught, they gossip about who's going to the gathering tomorrow. Ravenpaw notes that Sandpaw and Dustpaw are the eldest apprentices, with Firepaw being 8 or 9 moons old, Greypaw being 9, and Ravenpaw being around 11. Sandpaw and Dustpaw must also be at least 11 moons old, with their training starting before Ravenpaw's did. Chapters 12 and 13 both take place during the gathering. We find out that Broken Star has been a leader for 4 moons, meaning he succeeded Ragged Star around the same time Rusty started dreaming of mice and Spotted Leaf got her prophecy. So I guess StarClan was not a fan. So far, chapters have usually started or ended with Firepaw going to bed for the day and waking up the next morning. This has made it pretty easy to pair days and chapters. But chapters 14 through 25 take place over about 5 days, with days occasionally beginning and ending mid-chapter. So from here on out, I'm going to focus more on days than chapters. If it feels like I'm skipping around, don't panic. The day after the gathering, Firepaw wakes at dawn, the chill in the air reminding him that leaf fall is near. They start to get ready for their trip to the Moonstone, with Lionheart telling Greypaw to remember that he's almost a warrior now, after 3 whole moons of training. It takes until sunset to reach High Stones, and then they rest so that Blue Star can commune with StarClan at Moon High. After communing with StarClan, Blue Star rushes the group back towards camp. They make it to the farm. Blue Star dies. The sun rises. Blue Star lives. It's a new day and a new life. Our heroes race across WindClan and make it home around late afternoon. They find ThunderClan in the midst of battle. Everyone is fighting. The heavily pregnant Brindleface, Patchpelt, an elder who is only mentioned in the entire book this once. By the end of the battle, 2 are dead. An elder named Rosetail, who was guarding the nursery, and Lionheart, Greypaw's mentor. The cats gather around Lionheart to mourn him as the sun sets, and just before Moon High, Tigerclaw is declared deputy. Firepaw wakes at noon the next day, which is mostly spent rebuilding the Bramble Wall. There's also some build-up on various important plot points, but we're not here for that. Firepaw sleeps till noon again, having stayed up late rebuilding the camp. This entire day is spent with Blue Star beating up Firepaw, and he has so much fun training, he forgets to tell her about Tigerclaw committing homicide. Chapters 20 through 25 all take place across the same busy day. The day starts with Brindleface's kidding. Brindleface and her 4 kittens make our first canon family tree of this only counting the books timeline. Well, I guess we also have Goldenflower and her kit, but that guy is gonna stop existing pretty soon, so... Yellowfang refers to these kits as Brindleface's first litter, but don't ask me how she would know that. Say hello to Ashkit, Fernkit, and their unnamed siblings. Yay! What a lovely day. So Spotted Leaf is murdered. Frostfor's 4 kittens are stolen from the nursery, and while trying to retrieve them, Firepaw makes a detour to get Ravenpaw into witness protection before someone tries to murder him. We meet a bunch of ShadowClan cats who aren't going on the chart because there's no more room and the book's almost over anyway. Chapter 21 confirms Frostfor's kits are only 3 moons old, which I'm sure will cause no problems in the next book. This makes them barely old enough to be some of the kits we've heard mewling since the book has began. Personally, I think that makes that 2 moon old fluffy gray kit from 5 days ago too young to be Cinderpaw. But we have established that sometimes when Firepaw says 2 moons, he means 2 moons and 3 weeks. So they could be one and the same. Only 2 of the 4 kits are described, one being a tabby tom with a nasty wound on his ear, and one being a she-cat the color of cooled embers, otherwise known as cinders. Why do these cats know so much about fire? Our story ends with Firepaw and Graypaw becoming the warriors Fireheart and Graystripe. Fireheart sits his vigil and reflects on how he's not the same naive cat he was all those moons ago. All those moons ago, of course, being 3 moons. Now, a lot of this video has been me working through facts, opinions, and speculation, which I know is probably confusing. So, to clarify, here's our timeline from beginning to end. Remember these dates are approximate. Like, don't count them because they do not add up. First, there's a battle over Setting Rocks at some point during the end of winter. Later, in spring, Rusty joins ThunderClan. Around this time, Graypaw has just been apprenticed, Frostfor's kits should be newborns, Broken Star has been leader for a moon, and Longtail has been a warrior for 2, which is about the same amount of time Ravenpaw has been apprenticed. We get to see Rusty, now named Firepaw, spend 3 days in ThunderClan before a time skip that I'm saying lasts almost 3 moons, during which spring becomes summer. The rest of the book happens in just a week and a half at the end of summer, at the end of which Brindleface's kits were born. Oh, and WindClan. I've literally forgotten to mention them all video, but in my defense, they're not technically in this book. But if we look right here where Yellowfang shows up, the little sun icon that marks the end of our time skip, that's when Blue Star realizes they've been driven out. And since they would have been at the last gathering, we know they disappeared at some point during this moon. Okay, by the end of Into the Wild, Ravenpaw has left ThunderClan at 11 moons old, Graystripe and Fireheart are declared warriors at 9 and 8 or 9 moons respectively, Longtail has been a warrior for 5 moons, Broken Star has been a leader for 4, and Frostfor's kits are 3 moons old. And Brindleface's kits were newborns. Phew. Done. Thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see me tackle the next book. I hope it's at least as clear as this one, you know? Like, no vague time skips, or outright contradictions. I tried to show my work here, but if things don't add up, feel free to call me out in the comments. I welcome peer review. I only made this video because it didn't already exist. If you think you can do better, you probably can. I believe in you. And if you're watching this to actually find out what happens in Into the Wild, uh-oh. Sorry, I got distracted by the phases of the moon. See you later, people of YouTube.